I feel like this is going to be a very long video, so I wanted to keep it under 45 minutes, but we'll see. For the sake of keeping this video hopefully under the 45-minute mark, I did film my makeup application today, but I think I'm just going to intersperse clips of it in this video. I didn't want to apply the makeup and talk about the products all at the same time, simply because I figured that would take forever. So like I said, I did film this makeup look, and it is using the products that I'm talking about, or at least the majority of them. And I'll show you if there's anything particularly interesting in the application of them, but this isn't a full-on tutorial. This is more focused on the products themselves. In my real life, outside of this filming room, I have a lot of friends who really aren't all that into makeup, and they've been asking me, especially recently it seems, to teach them about makeup. And so, while I do have tutorials on my channel about basic application skills and things like that, I thought I'd take this opportunity to actually talk about the products, because I think buying makeup can be more intimidating than applying it. Once you learn a few techniques on how to apply and blend eyeshadow, you're pretty much good to go. But anytime you walk into Walmart, Shoppers Drug Mart, Sephora, whatever the case may be, or if you're looking on like the ColourPop website or any place that's going to be selling a large variety of brands or a large selection of items, it's going to be overwhelming, especially if you don't really know what you're looking at. So I've narrowed it down to a few different things here, different brands and different packaging of items, and that's what we're going to talk about. So first up is primer. Now, if you're brand new to makeup, primer is really just what it says. It's primer. So you apply this before you apply foundation or concealer, anything like that. And each primer has different functions, so you kind of have to know what your skin needs might be in order to really address them. So if you have larger pores, you might want to get a pore filling primer. If you have a lot of dryness, you might want to get a luminizing and moisturizing primer. If you're oily, you might want a mattifying one. So I buy makeup based on my own obvious skin needs. So I don't have an awful lot of like mattifying primers or anything like that, because I don't need that in my life. So when I looked through my selection of primers, the one that I pulled out to say this could very well be a universal type primer is from L'Oreal. This is the Infallible. This is the Glow Lock, and it's called an illuminating primer, but I find that it's not overly illuminating. Some of them are very much a dewy finish, and it's going to make your skin look almost oily or wet, whereas this one, it does bring a healthy glow to your skin, but it's not over the top. Thinking back to when I started getting into makeup, by far the most intimidating and most confusing products for me were foundation and concealer. I had no idea how to match them to my skin. I had no clue about things like undertones. I didn't know what cool versus warm was, or neutral. I had no idea what I was doing. So my recommendation, if you're just starting out with makeup, is forget foundation. Don't even worry about it. There are usually anywhere from 20 to 40, sometimes 50 shades to choose from, and while you can eliminate a good selection of them just based on how deep or light your skin might be, things like undertones very well may trip you up. So until you feel more comfortable with it, don't bother with it. Instead, I would recommend going with a tinted moisturizer. The one that I particularly like is from First Aid Beauty. This is the Ultra Repair Tinted Moisturizer. This is what the packaging looks like here. And I believe there are 4 shades to choose from. I think there's fair, light, medium, deep. I believe. Don't quote me, but I think that's what it is. I have light, and the nice thing about the tinted moisturizer is that if you go with light, it's really going to cover what probably 6 foundation shades would cover. So it's a lot more forgiving, and because it's so sheer in its coverage, you're not going to get a really clear demarcation mark between where the foundation ends and your skin begins. So it's a lot more forgiving, a lot more user-friendly. It still offers a bit of coverage. You'll see as I'm applying it that it does help to smooth out my skin, but you can see that it does help to even out my skin tone. It's not going to cover up a ton of blemishes or anything like that, but it does help, at least for me, to give me a little bit more confidence in my skin when I'm going out, and it's just basically the easiest thing. I can apply it with my fingers. I did apply it with my fingers for today's purposes, although usually I'd use a brush simply because it's just easier. I don't have to wash my hands after, and it just blends a lot faster. Brushes are tools. We'll get into that in another video. But this is the way to go if you're just dipping your toe into the makeup pool. The next step for me in makeup application is concealer, and there are a wide variety of concealers on the market. And I'm not necessarily going to recommend one over the other because I think it's really going to come down to personal preference, and I think there is a little bit of trial and error in with that. If you go to places like Sephora, they will give you samples, so don't be afraid to ask for it. They can color match you and they will give you a sample, and it'll be enough that you can get probably a good 3 or 4 uses out of it, so you can really play around with the product and see if it's something that you might be interested in purchasing. What I'm going to talk about in this video is just the method of application, I guess, or at least the packaging of the product. So I have a few here to talk about. There's another one somewhere floating around on my desk. No, there it is, it's in my hand. Ignore me. So one is like a squeeze tube. So this one is from IT Cosmetics. You just unsqueeze the bottom, squeeze out however much you want, and then away you go. Another option is something like this. This one's from Revlon. It has the little spongy tip on the end there, and then you have to click it in order to get the product to come out, and then you can dab it on and apply it from there. If you're brand new, don't try to blend it in with this little sponge because it's going to become very saturated with product and you're going to find it to be very, very frustrating. So word to the wise. Another option is a pump. So this one is from Physicians Formula, and it has just a little pump thing there. I like this product. I don't like the packaging because I can't control how much comes out with the pump. And a full pump is too much, but it's hard to get anything less than that. So for me, my personal preference is the doe foot. This one is from MAC, but there are a ton of options out there with doe foots. And what a doe foot is basically this little sponge thing here. Why they call it a doe foot, I don't know. I guess it's supposed to be shaped like a deer's foot. I have no idea. But I find that this is a lot easier because you control how much product comes out. You can get really precise application with it, and it's not going to become as super oversaturated because you can just easily wipe it off on the inner lid or the inner lip of the tube. And so I find this to be by far the cleanest, easiest, most hygienic way of doing it, and it provides the most control over it. Things like this little clicky, you gotta click so many times before the product comes out, and it's like it waits and then it just kind of all gushes forward. So it's a little fussy to work with. Squeeze tube would probably be my second choice, with the pump being last, I guess. But doe foot is the way to go, in my opinion. After I've applied those face products, I like to set it. Again, whether or not you set your face products with powder is personal preference. To me, it's just a habit at this point, and I find that I have to under my eyes at any rate, or the concealer does start to bunch up. With my face, depending on the product I use, with a tinted moisturizer, I don't have to set it, but I've basically just kind of fallen into a habit of doing that. What I find to be the easiest to work with is a pressed powder. This one's from Maybelline. I'm not necessarily saying this is the best powder on the market, although I do like this one. This is my second package of it, and you can see I've already hit the pan right there. So I do get a lot of use out of it. I just find this really easy because you just run your brush over it, dab it on, do your thing. You don't have to worry about it pluming out all over the place. It's not messy. Everything stays nice and contained in here, and it's just easier and faster. It doesn't fall all over your clothes like loose powders do. So while I do typically use loose powders, I prefer a pressed powder. So I can't explain my behaviors. All I can say is that I would recommend this, particularly if you're starting out. In terms of things like blush, bronzer, highlighter, all of that kind of thing, if you can find a palette that contains all of those colors in it, it's going to make life easier as you're starting out. One that I would definitely recommend, if you are getting into makeup, first of all, watch tutorials on how to apply contour shades, bronzer, all of that kind of thing, because there is a difference between bronzing and contouring. Bronzer tends to be about warming up the skin, whereas contour tends to be on the cooler side of things, creating shadows in the hollows of your face. This palette here, this one is from Smashbox. It's the Cali Contour Kit. I use this quite frequently because everything is in there and everything is basically the perfect tone, at least for my skin tone. So you've got a contour shade up here and then the bronzer here. So you can see this one looks almost a bit more gray, where this one has a little bit more of like an orange tone to it. That's what makes this warm versus this cooler. Obviously it has a blush down here. It's a very natural, neutral looking blush, so it's going to go with any eye look that you use, and you're not going to have to worry about it being overwhelming on your cheeks. It's not a bright fuchsia or red, anything like that. It is just a very natural looking color. These two are highlight shades in here. I tend not to use this one just because it doesn't really suit my skin tone, but this one is very pretty and it results in a very natural looking highlight. That's what I have on here today. It's not metallic or glittery looking. It just adds a little bit of a sheen without being overwhelming. Again, that can be quite nice if you're getting used to makeup and you're not used to seeing yourself with a ton of products on. Keeping it a little bit more on the natural side is probably going to be an easier way to ease into it. Finally, here there is, basically you can use this as like a setting powder under your eyes. It is a little bit of a yellow-based powder, so it's going to help to brighten things up. So if you do suffer from dark circles like I do, it's going to help to brighten things up underneath the eyes. When I'm applying eyeshadow, I I definitely always use an eyeshadow primer first. And I think that's where a lot of frustration comes from when people aren't used to using makeup, is that they apply eyeshadow and then it fades away or it bunches up and creases on their lids. Most times it's because they're not using a primer. People don't really know what primers are and they're not heavily marketed. So a primer, like a primer for your face, it's a primer for your lids, and it helps the eyeshadow to adhere better and last longer. And depending on the primer that you use, it can also help to basically color correct your lids or block out any veins that you may have or redness on there, so that you have like a nice neutral palette to work with, so that you can then just apply the eyeshadows on top. Again, there's a few different packaging options. So this one is from Urban Decay, and again, it's a little squeeze tube. You just take it off, and like a little tiny drop will do you for both eyes. MAC has something called paint pots. They are, I think, technically eyeshadows in and of themselves, but I like to use this one. This is in the shade Soft Ochre as a primer because it has that color to it. It blots out any veining that I have on my eyelids. If you are more of like a yellowy kind of skin tone, this one is going to work for you. If you're a little bit more on the rosier side, Painterly is going to work better for you because it is a little bit more pink based. What I find the easiest in terms of application method, again, is the doe foot. This one is from CoverGirl, and it just looks like the concealer does. So I just apply that onto my lids and then just use my fingers to blot it all out. Alright, now let's talk about eyeshadow. I've got a few palettes here. Most of them are neutral. I do have a few colorful options as well. So, first up, an oldie but a goodie, the Too Faced Chocolate Bar palette. There's a reason it's a classic. There's a reason it's a cult favorite. It's a neutral palette. There's a few little pops of color in there. There's a mix of shimmery shadows and mattes. You basically can't mess it up. So no matter what color combination you put together using these shadows, oh, bless you, sorry, the cat's in here with me. No matter what color combination you do, it's going to look fine. It's going to look good. And these shadows are really easy to work with. Some of them are not great, I will say. This purple is a little bit finicky, but for the most part, these are not shadows that are going to create a ton of fallout on your cheeks. So where shadow rains down onto your cheeks and gets all messy. These shadows are going to last throughout the day without fading. And it's just a really user-friendly palette, again, because the colors all complement each other. So you can really combine them in any way and it's still going to look good. I just about said well. Another great option for beginners is the Tartelette in Bloom palette from Tarte. What I really like about this, aside from it being a neutral palette so that it's not overly intimidating in terms of its color selections, what I really like here is that if you don't know how to place shadows or how to combine shadows, all you have to do is look across. So there's a look, there's a look, there's a look. And so if you have some basic techniques on how to apply them, you have looks right there. So what I would do here is I would say for this one, use this as a transition between the crease of my eye and the brow bone. This one I would put all over the lid. This shade would darken up the outside and line the lower lid. And then this would be like a highlight shade for the brow bone and the inner corner, maybe even over part of the inner part of the lid as well. So, and then you can do that with all 3 rows. But again, these are the kind of colors that you can mix and match and do whatever you want with, and it's really not going to be jarring and the colors aren't going to clash together. So one of the best palettes for absolute beginners that I can think of is from Wet n Wild, and this is in the shade Walking on Eggshells. So it is a very neutral palette. It's going to run you about $3 to $5, maybe edging towards $5 here in Canada. It's got 4 shadows in there, and you can see that the shadows are actually imprinted with where they go on the lid, as well as there's a little diagram on the back too. So you're not overwhelmed with colors. They're not deep and dark like what you see in the Tartelette in Bloom. This is as deep as it gets, and that's not really all that deep. So it's really not an intimidating look. If you do have a deeper skin tone, it's probably not going to show up all that well though, unfortunately, but if you are my kind of skin tone or lighter or a little bit darker, this would be a really good starting point because it's going to look very natural on you and it's not going to be this jarring change where you go from never wearing makeup to all of a sudden you're in like full-on clown gear. This is going to be a nice little transition into the world of makeup without it being intimidating or overwhelming. Okay, the cats are fighting now. We've got almost 2,000 square feet of living space and they have to sit in like the 2 feet beside each other and fight about it. Anyways, the last time I included this palette in a video, somebody came for me. But I'm going to include it anyways, and it's the Kat Von D Shade and Light palette. So I'm not here to make the decision for you whether or not you're going to support particular brands. If you're brand new to makeup, you may not even know the controversy going on behind Kat Von D. You can Google it and look it up and then decide for yourself if that's a brand you want to put money towards. I purchased this eons ago, and it's in my collection, so I'm going to talk about it. What I really like about the layout of this palette, and there are other brands that do set out their palettes like this. I believe Makeup Revolution has a bunch of palettes like this where they're grouped together. But what I really like about this is that you have one group here, one group here, one group here. So if you are looking at all these shadows and you're thinking, what do I do with this? You can just cut out the rest of the palette and just look at these 4, and those are all complementary tones. So you have a neutral option, a cooler toned option, and a warmer toned here. So depending on what you feel like wearing on that day, you can achieve it with this palette. And again, other palettes that have this layout I find are just really user-friendly because the looks are already grouped there for you and you don't have to worry about color matching or pairing things up because the palette already does that for you. So then, sometimes beginners don't just want neutrals. Some of you may want color, and what do you do with that? I initially was going to include the BH Cosmetics Back to Brazil, Take Me Back to Brazil palette because it's really not that expensive and it has a ton of shadows in there. I'll give it sort of an honorary mention. The shadows are not super pigmented. That can be a good thing for somebody who's newer to makeup and certainly somebody who's newer to color, because it gives you a lot more control in terms of building up that pigmentation. So for me, single shadows are typically the way to go, and indie brands. So brands that you don't necessarily see at places like Sephora, Shoppers Drug Mart, anything like that. Those often have the best colorful selections and best options. But the brand that I'm going to talk about here is ColourPop, because their price point is fantastic. Their pressed shadows, very impressive. And you can buy singles from them or you can buy palettes. I've got two palettes in particular. There is the Ooh La La palette and the It's My Pleasure. Obviously one is pink themed, one is purple. They've just released a green one as well, which I'm very tempted by, except I already have a palette very, very similar to that in my collection, so I really don't need it. But here is the pink one, the Ooh La La palette. And then the It's My Pleasure palette over here is the purple one. And these are just fantastic palettes. They're like $12. You get 9 shadows in them. It's going to be a little bit more intimidating because they're not set out in a way that the color or the combos are already made for you. But they're all complementary tones, so you can't really mess it up. You pick and choose however many you want and just smear them around on your eye and you're good to go. They're all going to look really nice together. What I have done today in this eye look is just used this center shade as an inner corner highlight in here. So there's just like a little hint of purple, little tiny bit of color, dip your toe into it, get used to seeing yourself with some color on your face, little something something, basically. So that's what I've done to bring just a little bit of color to an otherwise neutral look. And these are palettes and shadows that I would totally recommend. Okay, eyeliners. Not all eyeliners are created equal, that's for sure. My favorite pencil eyeliners are from Urban Decay. It's the 24/7 Glide On eye pencils. They are pricey for what they are, they're $25, but they last so long. They apply so easily, like there's no pulling on the skin. They're very, very smooth. They're just fantastic eye pencils to work with. You can smudge them out and they're just, they're my babies. I love them. Also ColourPop. So ColourPop has their cream gel liners, and what I really like about these ones is that they are retractable. So they go up, they go down, and they're like, I don't know, $4, something like that. And again, they have a bunch of colors to choose from, including really fun ones. So that is another really good budget conscious? Yes. A cheap option. Liquid eyeliners, there's a few different mechanisms. Again, you can do like the pot of gel and apply it with a brush. That to me is just altogether too much work. The applying it isn't really the bad thing, it's the cleaning the brush after. I'm just far too lazy for that. So I like liquid eyeliners. So this one is from NYX, not my favorite. So this has like an actual brush, and I just find that there's too much flexibility with that kind of thing, and that just creates unnecessary risk. So then I have two others. This is from Clinique. It's the Pretty Easy Liner, and it does have a brush, but you can see it's a very pointed brush. It doesn't splay around, and it just creates a nice even line. So I really do like this one. I think it's very appropriately named. The other one that I really like, this one is from Fenty. It's their Fly Liner. It looks very similar to the Clinique one, but this is a felt tip, so it doesn't actually have little brush bristles. It is a felt tip, as I just said. But I like this one because it does have some flexibility in that tip, like it moves around. I find when they don't move around, if they're too stiff, tee-hee, side joke to stiff tips, it actually can kind of hurt because there's just no flexibility, and then it's just, it's too much. It's too hard on the eyes. Does that make sense? I hope that makes sense. Anyways, as for mascara, I really don't have like a recommendation on a like beginner friendly mascara because there's really no like expert level mascara out there. So drugstore has some great options. That's all I can say about that. You really don't need to drop a ton of money on a mascara to get one that's going to perform really well. L'Oreal Lash Paradise, L'Oreal Unlimited. The one I'm wearing today is the CoverGirl Exhibitionist, and I actually really like this one. And then the other one that I would recommend would be Maybelline Total Temptation. Any of those are going to be excellent choices, in my opinion. This is going to be such a long video, I'm so sorry. Brows. There are no end of brow products. There's brow pencils, brow pomades, there's like brow tattoo things, there's a ton of stuff out there. For me, personally, what I prefer to use is like a brow gel mascara type thing. So this one is from ColourPop. There are no end of options out there from many different brands, but it's like a little tiny mascara wand. You just run it through your brows. And then it helps to like lock them into place while also helping to fill them in a little bit. I also like to go in with a dark shadow and an angled brush just to add a little bit more depth to my brows and fill them in just a little bit more. And that's all I do for brows, really. I don't get bothered with pencils and pomades and all that kind of stuff. I have fairly full brows to begin with, so I try to keep it as simple as possible. Last but not least, lips. There are a million lipsticks available. There are liquid lipsticks, there's regular stick lipsticks, there are little pots of lipstick that you apply. There's like no end of selection, and what is a girl to do? What I would suggest, if you are brand new to lipstick and makeup in general, avoid the liquid lipsticks for now. They're a little bit fussy. They're very pigmented, so it's going to be a very stark contrast for you. You may not necessarily feel comfortable with that level of color and coverage. And sometimes the formula can be a little drying and uncomfortable. It really depends on your own personal body chemistry and the brand that you choose. Instead, there's something like a gloss. This one is from Fenty Beauty. Freaking love this. It is the Gloss Bomb. It's the original one in Fenty Glow. It adds a little bit to your lips without being super wet looking. It's not sticky. It doesn't get like gummy and gross. It's just a beautiful, universally flattering shade. It also smells really nice. So this is the gloss that is like, it stole my heart. It's my favorite, and I'm not much of a gloss girl. That one I love. MAC is like the pinnacle of lipsticks. They have like 700 to choose from. It's altogether completely overwhelming. So here's the thing to know about MAC lipsticks is that there are a ton of finishes. So there is everything from their retro mattes to their regular mattes to luster finishes, cream sheens, satins. There's a ton of them. I personally think that cream sheens are the way to go. They are a little bit shiny on the lip, but they still have a good amount of opacity. So lusters are going to be the most sheer that they have, and I find lusters overall to be really frustrating because they wear off so quickly. So I would just sort of at least start with the cream sheens, kind of narrow it down. The one I am wearing today is called Modesty. It is one of the cream sheens, and I love this one because it's just so easy. It goes with any makeup look. That's a terrible swatch. There we go. It goes with any makeup look. It's not too pink. It's not too brown. It's just perfect. It's perfect. It's the lipstick that I always end up going to when I just can't decide which lipstick to wear. When I have bright, colorful makeup on, when I have neutral makeup and I just don't know what I want to wear, or if everything that I'm trying just isn't really working out, this is the one that inevitably saves me. Again, it's Modesty, and it is fantastic. Now, just as with eyeshadows, perhaps you do want to venture into the land of color. As I said, liquid lipsticks are going to have the most pigment payoff, typically speaking, but they can be intimidating to work with because of that. What I would suggest if you're a beginner is going for something like a lip tint. This one is from Sephora. It's called their Rouge Lip Tint. This one is in the shade 11, Violet Tint. What I like about this is, yes, it looks really deep and dark in the tube there, but applied, it's actually quite sheer. It's almost watery without it being runny, and then it does produce like a really nice stain on the lips, so as it wears off, it's not this stark contrast where you have lip color around the outside but then nothing on the inside. It doesn't rub off on your teeth, it doesn't smudge around on your face, it just kind of naturally fades away because it stains your entire lip. So I can show you the staining. So I just have a makeup wipe, and that's what's left on my hand. So it is long lasting. It packs a punch. I think these will run you about 15 to 18. I think 18, but again, don't quote me on that. But they're just a great product. They're very, very comfortable. You don't feel like you're wearing anything at all, so you're not even self-conscious of what's on your lips. And again, with that staining, it just makes it so much easier because it just wears off naturally and evenly throughout the day. All right, that is it. I say after I've talked for about an hour, editing this is going to be super fun. But I hope that this is helpful. I really do. I still remember going to the store and being like, I don't even know what this product is, and not knowing how to like color match and all of that kind of stuff. So I'm really happy to do beginner friendly videos because I find like a lot of the really big YouTubers don't take it back to basics very often anymore, and I thrived on that when I first got into makeup. Like I loved back in the day, 2012, 2013, before we had affiliate codes and before it was a marketing scheme and it was a business, back when it was about the makeup and about teaching and just sharing people's knowledge with others. I miss those days because it was like a time where you could just watch YouTubers and learn so much, and I soaked up as much as I could. And while there are still tutorials nowadays out there, of course there are, I just find that a lot of them are like super intricate cut creases, and it just, while it's really cool to look at and I don't mind dabbling with that every now and then and playing with it, it's not the most helpful thing to me because it doesn't fit my everyday life. So we're gonna keep it a little bit more basic here. I may throw in intricate things every now and then, but I'm not a NikkieTutorials. I just don't have that skill set. As I said at the beginning of this video, when I sat down 3 years ago to start filming it feels like, a lot of this was born out of just conversations with friends recently. Them just saying like, I don't even know where to start. And so I hope that this is helpful to any other newbies or even people who aren't newbies who just are looking for different product recommendations and things like that. If you have any questions or suggestions on other beginner-friendly type videos, feel free to leave that down below. I'm happy to read those. It's really helpful. And other than that, I'm just going to wrap this up because I've been talking for a really long time. It is after midnight and I need to go to bed. So, thank you, as always, for taking the time to watch, and I will see you in my next video. Until then, just be a decent human being. Bye for now.